The rain pelted down on Lagos as Kyoma leaned against the rusted window of the Danfo bus. Her stomach growled, and her head throbbed from hunger. It had been weeks since her last meal that wasn't noodles or bread. "God, help me," she whispered. She had graduated with a degree in mass communication 3 years ago, but still had no job. Every interview ended with rejection. Her mother's calls from the village grew more desperate each day. As the Danfo screeched to a halt at Oshodi, Kyoma dragged herself out and darted through the crowded streets. She was heading to her cousin Amaka's apartment, hoping for a warm meal and maybe some job leads. Amaka welcomed her with a bright smile. "Kyoma, you look like you've seen better days." Kyoma sighed, sinking into a worn-out armchair. "I don't even know what to do anymore. Life is hard, Amaka. No job, no money, no hope." Amaka's face lit up as if she had a secret to share. "You need to come with me to a special service tonight. There's this church, the Dominion Assembly. They perform miracles. People get jobs, heal from sicknesses, and even find husbands. I've seen it myself." Kyoma hesitated. "Amaka, you know I'm not into all those miracle churches. Most of them are fake." "This one is different," Amaka insisted. "The pastor is powerful. Just try it. What do you have to lose?" That evening, Kyoma found herself standing outside an enormous building in Surulere. The church didn't look like the small, humble churches she was used to. This one was grand, with glowing neon lights spelling out, "The Altar of Glory." Inside, the church was packed with people. The choir sang with such energy that Kyoma felt goosebumps. The congregation clapped, danced, and shouted praises as the pastor, Pastor Majestic, walked in. He was a tall, imposing man with a booming voice and a presence that demanded attention. His suit shimmered under the lights, and his smile was warm but unsettling. "Tonight is the night of breakthrough," he declared. "Whatever is holding you back will break tonight. But you must believe. Are you ready to kneel at the altar of transformation?" The congregation erupted in cheers. Kyoma remained seated, unsure of what to make of it all. But as the testimonies started, people sharing stories of sudden wealth, healed diseases, and marriages, she felt a small flicker of hope. When it was time for the altar call, Amaka nudged her. "Kyoma, go. Kneel and pray. Tell God what you want." Kyoma hesitated, but finally stood up. She didn't want to disappoint Amaka. Slowly, she made her way to the altar, where others were already kneeling, sobbing, and praying fervently. As she knelt, Pastor Majestic placed a hand on her head. His touch was cold, sending a shiver down her spine. "You are free," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. In the days that followed, things began to change. Kyoma received a call from a media company she had applied to months ago. They offered her a job with a good salary. Her landlord, who had been threatening to evict her, suddenly became lenient, even offering to fix the leaking roof in her room. "God has answered my prayers," she told Amaka, who smiled but said nothing. But then, strange things started happening. Kyoma woke up one night drenched in sweat. She had dreamed of kneeling at the altar again, but this time, the pastor's hand felt like iron, pinning her to the ground. She tried to move but couldn't. The next day, she found herself unable to say no to anyone. When her boss asked her to work overtime without pay, she agreed even though it meant missing dinner. When a colleague dumped her workload on her desk, she took it without protest. She called Amaka to share her fears. "Amaka, something is wrong. Ever since I went to that altar, it's like I'm not in control of my own life." Amaka's voice was tense. "Kyoma, I didn't want to tell you this, but that church isn't normal. I went there once, and it almost ruined me. Pastor Majestic has a way of binding people to him. Once you kneel at that altar, your spirit isn't fully yours anymore. Kyoma's heart raced. What are you saying? Is this some kind of cult? Call it whatever you want, Amaka replied. Just don't go back there, and whatever you do, don't disobey him. Days turned into weeks, and Kyoma's life became more troubling. She couldn't make decisions for herself. She felt like a puppet, her strings controlled by someone else. One day, Pastor Majestic called her. My daughter, his voice echoed in her mind, even though he was speaking over the phone. I need you to bring someone to the next service. Someone desperate, like you were. Kyoma froze. She didn't want to drag anyone into this nightmare. I don't know anyone, she stammered. You will find someone, he said, his tone final. That night, Kyoma paced her room. She knew she couldn't obey this command, but how could she fight someone as powerful as Pastor Majestic? The next service day arrived, and she stayed home, ignoring several calls from the church. But as the clock struck midnight, she felt an overwhelming force pulling her. She tried to resist, but found herself walking out of her house, as if controlled by invisible hands. She arrived at the church, trembling. Pastor Majestic was waiting for her, his face dark with anger. You dare defy me, he thundered. I can't do this anymore. Kyoma cried. I want my life back. Pastor Majestic laughed, a deep, chilling sound. Once you kneel at this altar, you never rise again. Your soul is mine. Kyoma fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. But then, she remembered Amaka's words. Don't go back there, and whatever you do, don't disobey him. Defying every instinct, she rose to her feet. No. I won't let you control me anymore. The room shook, the air thick with darkness. Pastor Majestic's form twisted, revealing a grotesque, inhuman figure. You cannot break the bond, he roared. Kyoma shut her eyes and prayed, louder than she had ever prayed before. God, if you are real, save me. A blinding light filled the room, and when she opened her eyes, Pastor Majestic was gone. The altar lay in ruins, and the church was eerily silent. Kyoma left the church that night, never to return. She shared her story with others, warning them about the dangers of false prophets and their miracle altars. Though she was free, she bore the scars of her experience, vowing to never again seek shortcuts to her problems. Sometimes, in her dreams, she still heard Pastor Majestic's chilling voice. But when she woke, she reminded herself, she had risen from the altar of no return. Months passed, and Kyoma tried to piece her life back together. Her new job gave her stability, and she was finally able to send money home to her mother. But the memories of her time at the Dominion Assembly haunted her. She sought solace in prayer and began attending a small, unassuming church led by an elderly pastor who preached humility and honesty. It was a far cry from the theatrics of Pastor Majestic, but it brought her peace. One evening, Amaka visited her with a worried look. Kyoma, have you heard? That church. The Dominion Assembly. It's back, Amaka said, her voice trembling. Kyoma's heart skipped a beat. Back? What do you mean? Another pastor has taken over. They've rebuilt the altar, and people are flocking there again, Amaka explained. Kyoma felt a wave of fear, but also determination. We can't let this happen again, Amaka. We need to expose them. The two women devised a plan. Armed with hidden recording devices, they infiltrated a service at the newly revived Dominion Assembly. This time, the pastor was a young woman with a soothing voice and an angelic smile. She introduced herself as Prophetess Celeste, claiming to be the new leader of the church. Kyoma recognized the same tactics: promises of wealth, healing, and success, followed by an altar call. As the service progressed, Kyoma whispered to Amaka, "They are doing it again. The altar is the key. We need proof." Amaka nodded, her hands shaking as she adjusted the recorder hidden in her purse. When the altar call began, Kyoma felt the familiar pull, but she fought against it. She stayed seated, watching as others knelt before the altar, their faces glowing with hope. Prophetess Celeste's voice rang out. "Those who kneel here are bound to a life of glory. Do not hesitate. Your blessings await." Kyoma's chest tightened. She knew what those words truly meant. After the service, Kyoma and Amaka followed the prophetess into a private room, pretending to be eager new members. Once inside, they confronted her. "We know what this altar is," Kyoma said boldly. "It's not for blessings. It's a trap." Prophetess Celeste's serene smile faltered for a moment before she composed herself. "I don't know what you're talking about. You should leave." But Amaka pulled out the recording device, replaying the prophetess's earlier words. "We have proof. We'll expose you." The prophetess's face darkened. "You think you can fight me? Do you know the forces I serve?" Kyoma stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "I've fought those forces before, and I won. You can't scare me." Suddenly, the room grew cold. The lights flickered, and a shadowy figure appeared behind the prophetess. Kyoma felt a chill run down her spine. It was Pastor Majestic, or what was left of him. His form was twisted, his eyes burning with rage. "You dare return to my altar," he growled. Kyoma clenched her fists. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." She began to pray aloud, her voice unwavering. Amaka joined her, their words echoing in the room. The shadow writhed, shrinking with every prayer. The prophetess screamed, clutching her head as if in pain. With a final burst of light, the shadow vanished, and the prophetess collapsed to the floor. The recordings Kyoma and Amaka collected were shared with journalists, sparking a public outcry. The Dominion Assembly was shut down, and investigations revealed the church's dark dealings. Kyoma became a quiet advocate for those who had fallen victim to similar schemes. She gave talks about the dangers of desperation and the importance of discernment. One evening, as she sat in her small but cozy apartment, Amaka visited again. "You're a hero, Kyoma," Amaka said, handing her a plate of jollof rice. Kyoma smiled. "I'm just someone who made a mistake and lived to tell the story." They laughed and ate together, the shadows of the past finally starting to fade. And though Kyoma knew she would never forget the horrors of kneeling at that altar, she also knew she had risen, stronger, wiser, and free.